Baruch Hashem, you're a bad Jew.
Shalom.
Hey, it's you again. Welcome back to another episode of Bad Jew, the place where there is no such thing as a bad Jew. With me today is Lorelai Kude. Lorelai, welcome to the podcast. We have a very interesting subject matter that I'm really excited to explore that isn't talked about ever. Welcome to the podcast. How are you today?
Baruch Hashem. I'm great. I'm so happy to be here with you today, Chaz. It's an auspicious day.
Thank you. I'm excited for the opportunity too, and there's a lot here to explore, and I think we have some good subject matter to cover. So with that, as you know, we have a right of entry onto this podcast, the 4-minute Bad Jew challenge, where you tell your life story in 4 minutes. Are you ready?
I am, but you're going to have to tell me when my time is up.
I'm not going to interrupt. I'm not going to interrupt you. That's actually something I make sure to do is like, we keep it within 4 minutes, but it's like, if it goes a little over, it goes a little over. I try to keep within 4 minutes. You're going to be fine. You're going to do great. I'm going to have the timer on my shoulder here. So, Echad, Shtaim, Shalosh, Yalla.
Yalla Abdallah. Hello, everybody. I'm Lorelai Kude, and I am a Jewish astrologer. That means I'm Jewish and an astrologer, and I do Jewish astrology, and which is not the same thing as regular astrology in every single way, which we'll talk about more later. And my story of my life is very long, but to shorten it, I was born in a galaxy far, far away in the very, very waning days of the analog life that we used to have a long time ago. And I started getting interested in astrology when I was about 12 years old. A friend of mine bought me a book that was a New York Times bestseller at the time called Lena Goodman's Sun Signs. And I read it. I was intrigued. And I started doing my own chart and everybody else's chart I could get my hands on. And this was back in the day before personal computers, where you had to actually use an ephemeris and a compass and protractor to figure out people's charts. And I was fascinated by it, and I became a professional astrologer concurrently with many, many other careers, including a long career in media and media production, television, radio, etc. So there was always these two concurrent tracks that my life was running down. And in 2007, I made Aliyah to Israel. And when I got there, I started telling people I was an astrologer, and they were like, in Masali, Israel, we don't believe in astrology. This is wrong. On one hand, on the other hand, they would come to me on the down low and say, I know I'm not supposed to ask, but tell me about my mazal, my constellation. So I immediately came up against this ambiguity in the frum or religious Jewish community, where people knew that there was a connection, but they had been told by the establishment, so to speak, that it wasn't so kosher. And I started learning about Jewish astrology there in Israel with rabbis, Kabbalists, who shall not be named because the real ones don't go around announcing who they are. And I came back from Israel in 2014 and went to grad school at GTU, Graduate Theological Union, where I got my master's degree in Jewish studies, and I wrote my thesis. It's called Yesh Mazal L'Yisrael, Astrology in Jewish Cultural History. And my research showed me that, far from what everybody thinks, astrology has been an ubiquitous and normal part of Jewish life since antiquity up until the eve of World War II. And later, maybe I'll tell you what happened in World War II that made that like not a normal thing. But how do we know this? We know this because we have thousands and thousands and thousands of examples of material Jewish objects from antiquity, maybe starting with Jewish horoscopes that were found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Cairo Geniza, all of these representations of Jewish astrological symbolism, the 12 tribes as related to the 12 constellations that we have on material objects like, for instance, Torah crowns, Torah dresses, or, the cloths that they use to wrap a Torah in, the walls and the floors and the ceilings of synagogues who have astrological motif paintings, calendars, regular household ephemera. There's just so many examples of these material objects that date all the way back to the Second Temple era that are full of astrological symbolism and have blatant astrological signs and symbols and everything else written upon them, that it's literally impossible to look at all that on one hand and then look at this one line in the Shulchan Aruch, the the code of Jewish law, that says you should not inquire of an astrologer or one who throws lots, per as in per in,
Mhm.
right? Lots was it's a divination technique. So if this, then that, why do we say Ein Mazal Israel? There is no Mazal. There's no, a Mazal is a constellation. There's no constellation for Israel on one hand. And then we have our great sages like Abraham Ibn Ezra and Barhia and others who tell us that the constellation for Israel is actually Aquarius. And today happens to be Rosh Chodesh Shvat, the month of Shvat. It's the first day of the month of Shvat. Rosh Chodesh means the head of the month, and Shvat is the constellation or mazal of Aquarius, even though the sun is still in Capricorn and Aquarius won't start until the 20th, solar Aquarius. So I'm talking about two different things: the solar calendar, January, February, March, blah, 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 and the Hebrew calendar, which is also 12 months, unless you get like this is a leap year. 7 out of every 19 years of the 19-year Metonic cycle are leap years. So if you put them together, take 19 years of the solar calendar and 19 years of the Hebrew calendar, and you put them on top of each other, you see that there's actually 36 different celestial combinations of the galaxy, meaning that if you were born today on Rosh Chodesh Shvat, but the sun was still in Capricorn, you'd be a Shvat Capricorn. If you were born this year after the 20th of January, between January 20th and February 10th, you would be a Shvat Aquarius, which people would think of as normal. Shvat and Aquarius being the same, right?
Sure thing. And the only reason why I'm holding the word timeout here is because within this 4-minute challenge of telling your life story, we kind of got into the subject matter here.
Oh,
There's a
take
lot
a
of
life story.
no, you're totally fine. There's a lot of numbers and words being thrown at me that I'm kind of getting a little bit lost in. I want to make
Oh,
sure
okay.
that me and the audience can learn this together here. This is exciting stuff, though. This is really cool. So, in terms of me asking, in terms of the question, do Jews believe in astrology? The answer isn't yes. It's duh. And so this is just me summarizing what I understand so far. The answer is duh. And the second thing is that, I mean, especially if we have a lunar calendar, we can't ignore the stars either.
Well, we
And
have a solar calendar. We have a lunar calendar, but it's corrected by the sun, because the whole thing with the Jewish calendar is no matter what else happens, Passover has to be in the spring. That's why we have the whole system that we have. If we had a purely lunar calendar, it would be like the Islamic calendar, which just goes by the moon, which goes backwards, so to speak. So
oh,
there's no
interesting.
correctiveness to it. Yeah.
Understood. Okay, so we have I've never even heard of our
Okay.
time being counterbalanced by the sun and the moon. I've never heard that before. That relationship's not talked about very often. But I want to backtrack because you said something very interesting about your journey in Israel. Why is the subject matter of astrology taboo?
Because I'll tell you why. This would not have been true if we were talking about any Jewish community, any normative Jewish community prior to the Holocaust. Wouldn't have been true. In fact, astrology was a subject that was studied in the yeshivas of medieval Ashkenaz. It's discussed in depth in the Talmud. The rabbis of the Talmud learned astrology so that they could teach it. But what did they learn? They learned what we would call Hellenistic astrology, meaning
Mhm.
Western astrology, as differentiated from Eastern astrology. So we're only really talking about the Western tradition, which came from Babylon, which got its information from Egypt and Babylon, Greece. So when you read a horoscope today, and any normal horoscope or anything, it's talking about quote unquote Western astrology. So we took that tradition, which existed way before we did, because Sometimes in the Talmud, it's called the art or the science of the Chaldeans. And remember Avraham, or what his first name was called, Avram, from Ur of the Chaldees. There are many midrashic stories about the lifestyle that was lived there, and astrology was a big part of it. So if Abraham was the first Jew, obviously astrology existed before us. We didn't invent it. We just brought it into the Jewish tradition and Jewified it. Okay. That's maybe a funny word, but we made it Jewish by integrating the principles of it into our tradition and finding ways to differentiate it from non-Jewish astrology. For instance, as an astrologer, I'll just give you two really major examples. In what you would call regular astrology, it's like, what's your sign? What's your sign? Everybody wants to know what your sun sign is. In Jewish astrology, the rising sign or the ascendant is actually more important than the sun sign, or it's looked at by an astrologer more closely and predominantly than the sun sign. There's a whole discussion about which is more influential, the sun or the hour of the day you were born, the hour meaning the rising sign, planetary hours. This is a discussion in the Talmud where the rabbis first are saying there's no Mazali Israel, and then they spend pages discussing how there is. That's typical Talmudic behavior. So we look at the rising sign and the planetary ruler of the chart, which is the planet that is associated with the sign of the rising or the ascendant. And we also have a huge emphasis on the lunar nodes, the north-south lunar nodes, which are referenced in our book, The Sefer Yetzirah, which is our foundational work of Jewish mysticism. It's the Tali, the dragon, and it's looked at in Jewish astrology as the tikkun point. Has to do with the tikkun of your neshama, of your soul. Why are you here? Why did you come into this world? What's your job? What are you supposed to be doing? This particular point in the horoscope is very sensitive, and Jewish astrology teaches about how to deal with that in ways that I'm going to say regular, secular, Hellenistic, whatever astrology doesn't. So those are two of several many, I'm going to say, market differentiators that Jewish astrology came up with. Because one thing about when we take any of the sciences that are done by other nations, we have to, and we've done this with everything, all the sciences have to find a way to make it relevant to us. So, of course, the 12 tribes are associated with the 12 signs and the 12 months of the year,
Hmm.
etc. And it's all over. You just have to, once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Right, right. And one thing that you made mention of before is that there's 36 constellations now. We can't help but
Not
draw in the connection
constellations, combinations.
combinations. Excuse me.
There's
So
36 celestial combinations when you overlay the two calendars.
right, and
So
30.
just 12 signs. Yeah.
Yeah, and 36 is divisible of 12. So I'm just thinking about these different numbers. I mean, the gematria, the study of the numbers. We're gonna do an episode about this in the future with a guest. So by the way, if you know of any guests out there, of any listeners if you know of anyone that specializes in the study of gematria, please tell them to email badjewpod@gmail.com. We'll have a conversation to get you on the show. Anywho, numbers are an incredible study here in the Jewish world, whether it's Kabbalistic or just basic Torah study. But here, especially from the Kabbalistic perspective, what part does that play when studying the stars?
Lamed Vav. So that's, Lamed Vav is in the Lamed Vavniks, 36 righteous individuals. So it's an important number in Jewish thought. It's 12 times 3, which is because when you do that thing with the calendar, you literally get 36. So why? Why is there 36? Is God giving us a little jokey there, saying, look, there's 36. It's okay. It's righteous. It's a tzaddik thing to do to understand your own masal. That's what I do as a Jewish astrologer. I work with people, individuals, and then I work with groups, different things, but mostly I work with individuals on their own natal chart to help people understand themselves better. That's really my forte. Is It's a very intimate thing. Usually I don't know the person I'm working with at all, which is much better for me, because if I know you, I'm going to have to figure out a way to block out everything I know about you so I can look at your chart and get a good reading.
And
But,
what is that? What is that chart exactly?
oh, it's a natal chart. It's a visual representation of where all of the planets, the asteroids, and these theoretical mathematical symbols that we use in astrology are at the date and the time and the place that you were born. And it's calculated using, well, now I use a computer program, but when I started, I had to use an ephemeris, which is a book that has all of a very, very thick book, like this big, that has all of the planetary positions for the last 200 years in it. And yeah, chart is a unique visual representation of the moment that you stepped onto the stage, and it was lights, camera, action when you were born.
Fascinating. It's yeah, it's and something you mentioned as well is that something happened in World War II
Yeah.
at the start of the Holocaust. So why exactly did the study of astrology stop because of World War II?
Okay. So Chaim Soloveitchik wrote a book called Rupture and Reconstruction, in which he addressed this question broadly, not having anything to do with astrology, but astrology is one of the things that was lost during World War II, the normativeness of astrology. Because if you think about that, 6 million Jews were killed, Jewish community, Jewish identity, and what was considered normative was lost at that time. So let's just say, and not a lot of older people survived the Holocaust, right? So let's say you're a teenager, God forbid, and you went through the Holocaust, you got out of Bergen-Belsen or wherever, and you got together with your other young Jewish friends, survivors, and you were like, I don't remember how to keep kosher exactly. Do you remember, what did your mother do? Because when I was growing up, we didn't read the Shulchan Aruch to figure out what was kosher. I knew what was kosher by hanging out in my mother's kitchen and her mother's kitchen. It's called, in Soloveitchik's phrase, is called mimetic communal norms. Mimetic as in mimicking,
Mm,
communal as in the community norm. So what's the norm for a community prior to World War II was not what is written. It was not text based. It was community based. What was normal for that community? You know that different Jewish communities all over the world keep different traditions, right? Some communities, only wait 1 or 2 hours after between a meat and milk meal, and some wait 6. So what's normative for a community, right? That's one
yeah.
thing. It was normative for communities to have objects that were decorated with astrological motifs, that were simple home objects for use, like a calendar, and sacred objects like a Torah crown or a Torah dress or a synagogue wall or something like that. So it wasn't just, it was so normative that we have at the Center for Jewish Art in Jerusalem, they have thousands of examples of this. You can go on a website that they have, the Center for Jewish Art's website, and search by iconographical subject and put in any of the zodiac signs, and you'll get hundreds of hits of pictures of everything from all the things I mentioned before to, decorated Megillas and sitters and machzors and prayer books. What could be holier than a prayer book? If there's Ein Mazal Yisrael, if it's so forbidden, why are there pictures of zodiacs, whole zodiacs in prayer books? That's, we it's a vocabulary thing from, like, religious Orthodox Jews don't really like that term, but we're using these. And if it was so forbidden, why is it in there? Right.
It's
So
yeah.
I'm saying that that we used to know that it was a regular thing, that our communal memory was wiped out during World War II. And then afterwards, what happened to Judaism afterwards is that we don't have our elders around anymore to tell us how we normally did things. What do we have? We have text. Baruch Hashem, we have our text, we have the Shulchan Aruch, we have all of our Sforim, we have all of these different texts. Oh, here in this text, in this one line, it says, do not inquire of astrologers or those who who throw lots. That is taken as just as is. Now, after World War II, so people started thinking, well, they shouldn't even know or inquire or ask questions about astrology. So they don't. And that's what, but yet they know because they see, especially if they've seen any of these, these visual examples, they know that we have a tradition, but they don't know what it is. So they stay away from it.
What I'm remembering right now, what you reminded me of is that in a previous episode we did with Roz Rothstein, who is the CEO of Stand With Us. Roz talked about how her parents were Holocaust survivors and how after the Holocaust, being born into it, she was aware of the concept, but only until a later age did she really know what her parents went through. And it's because her parents wanted to protect her from knowing about the traumas that they went through.
Right.
And what occurred to me just now, I mean, obviously, the number of 6 million deaths has been a hard hitting trauma for our people across the world. And it's been
Absolutely.
something that has been a detriment and a hard memory to hold on to with deep lesson. But I think the one thing that you've really illustrated here to what you're saying that has really resonated with me is the fact that we were probably, as a Jewish people, at the peak of our wealth. And by wealth, I'm not talking about money. I'm actually talking about wisdom and knowledge. Right before the Holocaust, we had an oral tradition that was passed down from generation to generation in this
Mhm.
incredible way. And because of Hitler's efforts with the Third Reich, we lost so much. And
Right.
so I think that's something we forget so much is that we're not just losing the life of, the individual, 6 million at that. We also lost so much wisdom that was
Right.
passed down in this wonderful, beautiful way. How tragic that is that we lost that. And so now, is Jewish astrology, is it coming back? Is it back in style, or is it still taboo? What is this current state of this
I don't
fetish?
know about style. It's definitely back. My life's work is kind of about bringing it back into a normative relationship with the Jewish community. I don't want people to just go, "Oh my God." And I also have to say that, I have many, many clients who are religious or self-identified Orthodox from birth people who are my clients, but I totally advertise by word of mouth. Like they tell other people around about me. It's always like, I want to know, but don't tell anyone because, if my community knows I'm talking to an astrologer, my son won't get a shidduch kind of thing.
Or why is
But
there so much shame around it still? I don't understand that.
there's a lot of shame because of people who don't understand our Masorah, our tradition, and don't understand how prevalent it was. And also because people feel that it has to do with divination, which is always a word that scares people. And it's not used that way. I don't do divination. I'm not going to tell you a person is going to die, God forbid, lo aleinu, pa pa pa. I talk about weather, emotional weather. I mean, literal weather was the subject of probably 70% of all astrological forecasts in the ancient world. Why? Because weather is all we care about. Will our crops die? Will our crops grow? Will we have a harvest? Think about it. So, weather forecasting was done with astrology. Even there's something called brontiological forecasting, which is the kind of forecasting they used to do with thunder and lightning, which is crazy. And I don't understand it at all. But if you think about divination, most of the questions that people would want to know have to do with, are we going to be alive next year? Are we going to have something to eat? So this was basically the topic that was really, really out there. But then people wanted to know things maybe that they shouldn't know or whatever. So there's the idea that, like the Pharaoh's astrologers thought that they were going to get one over on the Jews by by telling Pharaoh that Moshe was born during Chodesh Adar and that water would be his downfall, but they didn't understand about Adar, and there was two Adars. We always have like a way around it throughout with our own system that we can thank our sages for that, because they're very good at finding ways to bypass the problems. I'm trying to answer the question. I think I'm getting off topic. Think people in the frum community are afraid of what other people think. It's a very socially, they police their own community very harsh, very stringently, I will say. And nobody wants to do anything that somebody will say, oh, that's weird, or it's not kosher, or it's not right, because it affects you socially, which means it affects your children's chances of making a good marriage. And
Interesting. It's very
if people are
fascinating.
curious and they want to know, I have many rabbis and many clients who are from that community, and I'm recommended by word of mouth by them. So they don't go around telling people unless they ask.
Right. You mentioned death, and I know that again, it's not something that you look at, but is that information that you have?
No,
Okay. So death is not on the menu. It's not something
I
that
so I always look at people's charts whenever anybody dies, I look at their chart to
okay.
see what is what's up with their chart. And sometimes you see something that you can interpret as, oh, sometimes you don't see anything. I have this one friend, according to his chart, he should have been dead like 4 or 5 years ago. Every time I talk to him, I'm like, you're according to astrology, you're living way beyond your natural life, because God is the one that has the power of life and death. It's not the stars. My understanding of astrology is not that they're causative, but that they're reflective. They reflect a reality. They don't make things happen.
Mm,
Okay. Which is very different than how the ancient world understood astrology. They thought of it as very fatalistic, like you can't escape your stars. Whereas our real the height of Jewish astrology was really the medieval times, like Ibn Ezra, Ibn Ezra, who was a great Torah commentator, was also a master astronomer and astrologer. He had these basic principles of astrology, which he laid out, basically the rules of how to understand astrology. And one thing that we just don't do is talk to people about when they're going to die, whether or not they want to know. But what we should do is talk to people, warn them if there's a situation that we can see that they should avoid for health and safety reasons. And that's the same thing as weather forecasting. If was a weather forecaster and I knew that there was going to be a tornado, would I be a good person if I didn't tell you, because that might be divination? No.
right.
So when I see something in somebody's chart that indicates that certain kind of rough times might be ahead, and I will always tell them, but I will give them a solution. I'm not going to just let them hang, because if you know something is coming, there's other parts of your chart that you can look at for clues and ideas of how to mitigate that kind of energy.
So obviously that's pertaining to weather, but does it also pertain to tragedies and certain crises that are happening in the world? And
Yeah.
to ask very specifically this one question, I don't know if I'm the only one thinking about this, but is it possible that you just use astrology to understand when something like October 7th might come up?
I've been doing the chart of the state of Israel for many years. I usually do a forecast for the year, which I didn't do this year, and I'm really glad I didn't do it this year. The For a number of reasons. Last year, I talked about how Israel was going to undergo an identity crisis, and that I proved it out. Like, I always show my work. I don't just say things. I say, because X, Y, Z. I would love it if any other astrologer came along and gave me a different interpretation of that, which never really happens, but it would be kind of fun for me to have a conversation, with someone who could do that. So there's a lot going on with the state of Israel. And I just want to be clear that there's a big difference between the Jewish people, Am Yisrael, and the modern state of Israel that was born on May 14th, 1948, and has a natal chart, just like the United States of America was born on July 4th, 1776 at a certain time in a certain place and has a natal chart. So meaning that if you can pinpoint the birth of something, that means you can do its chart. You can't do that with a people like the people of Israel is a maternal people that you can't say has a chart, but the nation, modern Israel does. So I work with that chart a lot, and I'm very concerned with what's going on right now. Of course, I lived in Israel for many years. All my friends live there. I'm a Zionist, meaning that I believe that the Israel is the national homeland for the Jewish people. That doesn't exclude anyone else. It just means that it's our makom, it's our place.
Of course.
And I'm very concerned with the ongoing identity crisis that we're having right now. That's manifesting in an entirely different thing. I will say this is that Pluto, a planet that was only just discovered, in the 1930s, 1930, 1931, something like that, which is the planet of intense transformation, is about to enter Aquarius for the next 20 years. And Aquarius is the sign of the Jewish people, because it's very funny. The sages say, we don't have a mazal. There is no sign for the Jewish people. But if there was a sign, it would be Aquarius. Why? That's so Jewish, right? There isn't, but if there was, it would be this. But it isn't, but it is. It's like
Okay.
that.
Interesting. If you could
Yes.
quickly explain why Aquarius is the closest to an astrological sign for the
Because
Jews, that'd be great.
because
Yeah.
everybody knows that, first of all, that the Jewish people's planetary ruler is Saturn, which is Shabtai. Saturn is the planetary ruler of the Sabbath and all systems. And again, there's planetary rulers for the different days of the week in our system that differs from, let's say, the Hellenistic or Greek system. So, but all systems agree, no matter what system, that Saturn is the planet of Saturday, the Sabbath, Shabtai. So Saturn is the classical ruler of Aquarius and Capricorn, but in this case, Aquarius is the Dali or the water bucket. And the B'nai Yissachar says that the bucket is the servant of the water, like the Jewish people are the servant of the Torah. So the bucket serves the water. Like, can I give you more water? I'm not saying serve like bow down before it and let me bring you bonbons and feed them to you. Not that kind of service. Serving like this, like I'm going to serve you some water. The Jewish people are servants of Torah. We're supposed to serve up Torah. Okay. It's our job to be the Dali, the water bucket. And when we're doing our job, it's all harmonious. When we're not doing our job, things go bad. And we see that day in and day out.
It's very fascinating. Lorelai, I think you've given everyone here so much to think about. And I want to thank you again for being on this podcast, for taking these 30 minutes to educate us on this concept that really deserves hours and hours and years of time. That was a big jump of units of time there. But anyway, you get the point. For those who are listening, be sure to check out myjewishstars.com to learn more about Lorelai's work and how she is able to create your chart. And I'm really excited to learn more about this. So, Lorelai, thanks again for being on Bad Jew.
Thank you so much, Chaz. And
Mhm.
Chodesh Tov.
Thank you. Thank you. And for the listeners out there, be sure to subscribe to Bad Jew. Tune in next week to learn more about our exciting episodes.
Shalom.